The sound of a gunshot cracked through the dusty air of Willow Creek, Montana, causing Hazel O'Sullivan to bolt upright in her bed, heart hammering against her ribs. Outside her window, the first streaks of dawn painted the vast Montana sky in shades of pink and gold. It was 1878, and trouble never seemed to take a day off in these parts. Hazel flung her quilt aside and rushed to the window, her long auburn hair tumbling over her shoulders. Below, in the yard of her small ranch, 3 men on horseback circled her prized stallion, her father's stallion. Her only inheritance after fever had taken both her parents last winter. She grabbed her father's old rifle from above the door, not bothering to tie back her hair or pull on proper attire over her nightgown. With bare feet slapping against the wooden steps, she burst onto the porch. "Get off my property," she shouted, raising the rifle to her shoulder with practiced ease. The men turned, surprise evident on their faces. One of them, a wiry man with a patchy beard, laughed. "Look here, boys. Little Hazel O'Sullivan's threatening us. Your daddy's dead, girl. You can't run this place alone. Sheriff's already approved the sale to Mr. Henderson." Hazel's finger tightened on the trigger. "There's been no sale. This land is mine by right. Now get." The men exchanged glances, clearly not expecting resistance. The bearded man spat on the ground. "You got 3 days, O'Sullivan. 3 days before we come back with papers and the law behind us." After they rode off in a cloud of dust, Hazel lowered the rifle, her hands trembling. 3 days. She had 3 days to figure out how to save her family's legacy. The O'Sullivan ranch wasn't much, 80 acres, a small herd of cattle, and her father's prized horses, but it was everything to her. She dressed quickly in a worn cotton shirt and riding skirt, her mind racing. She needed help, but who would stand against Henderson? The cattle baron had been buying up every struggling ranch in the territory since the economic panic of '73. By mid-morning, Hazel had ridden into Willow Creek, her chestnut mare kicking up dust along the main street. The town was growing. A dozen new buildings had gone up in the past year, and the railroad was rumored to be coming through soon. Progress, they called it. To Hazel, it just meant more people wanting what wasn't theirs to take. She tied her horse outside the law office and marched inside, boots clacking against the wooden floor. Sheriff Dawson looked up from his desk, cigar clamped between his teeth. "Miss O'Sullivan, what brings you to town?" "You know damn well what brings me, Sheriff." Hazel planted her hands on his desk. "Henderson's men said you approved the sale of my ranch. That true?" The sheriff removed his cigar, tapping ash into a brass tray. "Now, Hazel, be reasonable. You're a woman alone. Your father's debts, my father's debts, are nearly paid. I've got buyers lined up for the spring foals. I just need time. Henderson's offering fair market value. It's not for sale." Her voice rose, drawing the attention of a tall figure leaning against the doorframe. "Sounds like the lady's made up her mind, Sheriff." Hazel turned. The man was a stranger, tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair peeking out from under a well-worn Stetson. His clothes carried the dust of long travel, but the 6-shooter at his hip gleamed with care. Sheriff Dawson frowned. "This isn't your business, stranger." Lucas Irwin. The man tipped his hat. "Just arrived on the morning stage, and seems to me a sheriff pressuring a lady to sell her property might be everybody's business." Hazel narrowed her eyes. She didn't need some drifter fighting her battles. "I can handle this myself." Lucas Irwin's blue eyes crinkled at the corners. "No doubt you can, madam." Sheriff Dawson stood, his chair scraping against the floor. "Henderson's got the bank behind him, Hazel. Your father took out a mortgage last year. Payments coming due." Hazel felt the blood drain from her face. Her father had never mentioned a mortgage. "How much?" $500. "Due end of the week." $500. It might as well have been 5,000. Hazel's mind raced through her assets. The cattle wouldn't bring half that until fall roundup, and the foals were still too young to sell. She straightened her shoulders. "I'll find a way." Outside the sheriff's office, Hazel leaned against the hitching post, struggling to maintain her composure. The stranger Lucas followed her out. "500's a steep sum," he commented. Hazel shot him a glare. "I don't recall asking your opinion, Mr. Irwin. Just making conversation." He leaned against the post beside her, seemingly untroubled by her bristling hostility. "You planning to rob a bank?" "Because I'd advise against it. Security's gotten much better since the early days. Despite herself, Hazel felt a laugh bubble up. No bank robberies. I was thinking more along the lines of selling my soul to the devil. Lucas grinned. Got a better idea. The saloon's got a poker tournament starting tonight, $500 pot. I don't gamble, good policy, but I do. He straightened his hat, and I'm pretty good at it. Hazel studied him. Everything about Lucas Irwin screamed drifter, the kind who blew into town, caused trouble, then disappeared when things got complicated. But there was something in those blue eyes that gave her pause. Why would you help me? You don't know me. Let's just say I've got my reasons for not being fond of land grabbers like Henderson. He offered his hand. Partners, just until you get your ranch squared away. Hazel hesitated. Her father had taught her to be wary of smooth-talking men with easy solutions, but what choice did she have? I don't need a partner, she said firmly. But I could use a hired hand. Spring roundup's coming and I'm short-handed. Lucas's smile widened. Fair enough. When do I start? The ride back to the O'Sullivan ranch was tense with unspoken questions. Hazel couldn't figure Lucas Irwin out. He rode like a man who'd spent his life in the saddle, but his hands were too smooth for a career cowboy. He spoke with an educated accent that slipped occasionally into something rougher. You're not from around here, she said as they crested the hill overlooking her ranch. From this vantage point, the weathered buildings and fenced pastures looked small against the vastness of the Montana landscape. Texas originally, he replied. Been moving around since the war. The war's been over for 13 years. Lucas's expression shuddered. Some wars never really end, Miss O'Sullivan. At the ranch, Hazel showed him to the bunkhouse empty now except for old Miguel who helped with the horses. It's not much, she admitted. I've slept worse places. Lucas slung his saddlebags over his shoulder. I'll get settled, then help with evening chores. Hazel nodded stiffly. The poker tournament starts at 8. If you're still planning on that fool's errand. Lucas just smiled. I'll be ready. True to his word, Lucas worked alongside Hazel all afternoon. He moved with the efficiency of someone who knew ranch work, intimately mending a broken fence section, helping check the pregnant mares, even fixing a leak in the barn roof that had been bothering Hazel for weeks. At dusk, they rode back into town together. Hazel had changed into her one good dress, a blue calico that had belonged to her mother. She felt Lucas's eyes on her as they tied their horses outside the Golden Nugget saloon. You clean up nice, Miss O'Sullivan, he said. So do you. It was true. He'd shaved and changed into a clean shirt, though he still wore his trail-worn duster. Inside, the saloon was crowded with cowboys, miners, and townspeople. A haze of cigar smoke hung in the air, and a piano player banged out a jaunty tune in the corner. Several tables had been pushed together for the poker tournament, and a dozen men were already taking their seats. You sure about this? Hazel asked, suddenly doubting the wisdom of their plan. Lucas patted his pocket. Got my entry fee right here. Borrowed against my first month's wages as your hired hand. I haven't agreed to pay you yet. He winked. Consider it an investment in both our futures. For 4 hours, Hazel watched from a corner table as Lucas played. He had a remarkable poker face, calm and unreadable whether his hand was good or bad. One by one, players folded out of the game until only 3 remained. Lucas, a railroad man from Helena, and Henderson's foreman, a brutish man named Clancy. The pot had grown to well over $500. Hazel's heart pounded as Lucas studied his cards. Everything depended on this hand. Call, Lucas said, adding his chips to the center. Clancy smirked. 3 kings. He laid his cards down with a flourish. The railroad man cursed and threw in his hand. Lucas paused, his expression giving nothing away. Then, slowly, he revealed his cards. Full house, queens over 10s. A murmur went through the crowd. Clancy's face darkened. You cheated. Lucas's voice remained even. Careful with accusations like that, friend. Clancy surged to his feet, chair scraping back. Nobody's that lucky. You've been winning all night. Not all night, Lucas corrected. Lost plenty too, that's poker. Clancy's hand moved toward his gun. Hazel tensed, but Lucas didn't flinch. I wouldn't, he said softly. Something in his tone made Clancy hesitate. The saloon owner stepped forward. No trouble in my establishment, gentlemen. Irwin won fair. I was watching. Clancy spat on the floor. Henderson's gonna hear about this. I'm sure he will, Lucas replied, calmly collecting his winnings. Outside in the cool night air, Hazel finally let out the breath she'd been holding. That was close. Lucas counted out $500 and handed it to her. Your mortgage payment, Miss O'Sullivan. Hazel stared at the money in her hands. I can't believe it worked. Told you I was good. He pocketed the remainder. And I've got enough left over to celebrate. Dinner at the hotel restaurant tomorrow night. Hazel hesitated. Mr. Irwin, Lucas. Lucas, she amended. I appreciate your help, but don't mistake business for something more. He looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable in the moonlight. Wouldn't dream of it, Miss O'Sullivan, just a meal between employer and employee. Hazel ignored the odd flutter in her chest. Fine, dinner it is. The next morning, Hazel rode to the bank first thing and paid the mortgage. The banker seemed surprised, almost disappointed to see her with the money in hand. Henderson won't be pleased, he remarked as he wrote her receipt. Henderson can go to hell, Hazel replied sweetly. She spent the rest of the day showing Lucas around the ranch. The O'Sullivan land wasn't vast, but it was good rich grazing meadows, a year-round creek, and protected valleys that stayed green even in drought years. My father built this place from nothing, she explained as they rode the boundary fence. Came out from Boston in '49, said the East was too crowded for a man to breathe properly. Lucas nodded. Good land, you've maintained it well. We do all right. She patted her mare's neck. The horses are our specialty. Dad had an eye for good bloodlines. And you inherited that eye, Hazel smiled, the first genuine smile she'd given him. I did. That bay stallion you saw yesterday, his foals will fetch top dollar from the army buyers next year. As they rode, Hazel found herself talking more than she had in months. There was something about Lucas that made it easy to open up, perhaps because he listened without interrupting, his eyes attentive beneath the brim of his hat. People around here call me stubborn, she admitted as they watered their horses at the creek. Say a woman has no business running a ranch alone. Lucas studied her for a moment. Stubborn's not always bad. In fact, I'd say that's why you're strong enough to make it out here. Hazel looked at him sharply, but his expression held no mockery, only quiet admiration. That evening at the hotel restaurant, Hazel felt strangely nervous as she smoothed down her dress. She rarely came to such establishments, couldn't afford to, mostly, and the knowing looks from the townspeople made her uncomfortable. Lucas stood when she approached their table, pulling out her chair with formal courtesy. You look lovely. It's the same dress as yesterday, she pointed out. And you looked lovely yesterday, too. Over dinner, Lucas told her stories of his travels, cattle drives in Texas, mining camps in Colorado, fishing boats in San Francisco. He had a gift for description that made these places come alive, though Hazel noticed he rarely mentioned specific dates or details about himself. You've led quite the adventurous life, she remarked as their plates were cleared. Lucas swirled the whiskey in his glass. Some might call it aimless. What brings you to Montana? Something flickered in his eyes. Change of scenery. You're not much for straight answers, are you? He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Let's just say I'm between chapters in my life, looking for a fresh start. Before Hazel could press further, the restaurant door banged open. Henderson himself strode in, flanked by Clancy and another man. The cattle baron was in his 50s, expensively dressed, with a meticulously groomed beard and cold eyes. He made a beeline for their table. Miss O'Sullivan. I hear you paid your mortgage. Hazel lifted her chin. That's right. Unfortunate, I had plans for that parcel. Henderson's gaze shifted to Lucas. And you must be the card sharp who helped her. Lucas leaned back in his chair, seemingly relaxed, though Hazel noticed his hand had dropped below the table. Just a friendly game of poker. I've been inquiring about you, Mr. Irwin. Interesting what a telegraph can reveal. Lucas's expression didn't change, but something dangerous flashed in his eyes. Is that so? Henderson smiled thinly. Very interesting indeed. I suggest you move on, Mr. Irwin. Montana doesn't suit your health. After Henderson left, a heavy silence hung between them. Hazel studied Lucas's face. What was that about? Nothing that concerns your ranch. He tossed back his whiskey. But perhaps I should move on, don't want to bring trouble to your door. That's it, Henderson makes vague threats and you're running. Hazel felt inexplicably betrayed. I thought you had more spine. Lucas's jaw tightened. You don't know what you're talking about. Then explain it to me, he stood abruptly. Thank you for dinner, Miss O'Sullivan. I'll collect my things in the morning. Hazel watched him leave, confusion and hurt warring inside her. She'd just begun to trust him, to believe he might be different from the other drifters who passed through. Clearly, she'd been wrong. The next morning, Hazel rose before dawn and went straight to the stables. Work was the only cure for foolish disappointment. She was mucking out stalls when she heard footsteps behind her. I was wondering when you'd show up to collect your pay, she said without turning. Actually, I came to explain. Hazel turned. Lucas stood in the stable doorway, his saddlebags over his shoulder. He looked tired, as if he hadn't slept. You don't owe me explanations. Maybe not. He stepped inside, setting his bags down on a hay bale, but I'd like to give you one anyway. Hazel leaned on her pitchfork, waiting. My name is Lucas Irwin, that much is true. But Henderson knows me by a different name, Luke Blackburn. I was a lawman in Wyoming Territory until 3 years ago. What happened 3 years ago? Lucas's eyes darkened with memory. I was tracking a gang that had been terrorizing ranchers, small operators mostly like your place. Turned out the gang was working for a cattle company driving people off their land so it could be bought cheap. Like Henderson, just like him. I gathered evidence, built a case, then my partner was found dead shot in the back. The evidence disappeared. And suddenly I was the one under investigation, accused of taking bribes, looking the other way. Hazel's grip tightened on the pitchfork. Were you guilty? No, the word came sharp and certain, but it didn't matter. The cattle company had friends in high places. I was run out of Wyoming with a ruined reputation and a price on my head. And now Henderson knows who you are, Lucas nodded. He's cut from the same cloth, probably has friends in common with my old enemies. So you're running again. Hazel couldn't keep the disappointment from her voice. That was my first instinct, he admitted. But then I realized something. I've been running for 3 years, never staying anywhere long enough to clear my name or build anything real. He took a step closer. I'm tired of running, Hazel. It was the first time he'd used her given name. The sound of it in his deep voice sent an unexpected warmth through her. What are you saying? I'm saying I'd like to stay, help you with the ranch, maybe put down some roots for a change. Hazel studied his face, looking for deception. Henderson will make trouble. Henderson was already making trouble for you before I arrived. At least now you've got someone watching your back. She thought about it. Having Lucas stay meant inviting his problems into her life. But the ranch needed help, and there was something about him, his quiet competence, his integrity that she was beginning to trust. The pay isn't much, she warned, and the work is hard. Lucas smiled, a slow smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. I've had worse offers. The next few weeks settled into a rhythm. Lucas proved himself invaluable around the ranch, repairing years of neglected maintenance, helping break the younger horses, even negotiating better prices with the cattle buyers who had previously taken advantage of Hazel's inexperience. Henderson kept his distance, though Hazel often spotted his men watching the ranch from the ridge line. The threat hung over them, unspoken but ever-present. Spring arrived in full force, turning the pastures lush with new grass. The mares delivered healthy foals, and the cattle began to put on weight after the lean winter months. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains gold, Hazel found herself studying Lucas's profile. He'd changed in the weeks since his arrival. The wariness in his eyes had softened, and he smiled more easily. He belonged here somehow in a way she couldn't quite explain. Penny for your thoughts, he said, catching her gaze. Hazel looked away, suddenly flustered. Just thinking about the spring roundup. We should start gathering the cattle next week. Is that all? His voice held a hint of teasing. Before she could answer, the sound of approaching riders made them both tense. Lucas stood, hand dropping to his holster. 3 riders emerged from the gathering dusk. Hazel recognized Clancy and 2 other Henderson men. Evening, O'Sullivan, Clancy called. Got a message from the boss. Lucas stepped in front of Hazel. Deliver it and move on, Clancy sneered. Message is simple. Henderson's offering one last chance to sell, double market value. The answer's still no, Hazel replied, moving to stand beside Lucas. Boss figured you'd say that. Clancy's smile turned ugly. That's why he sent us with a persuader. He pulled a torch from his saddlebag and lit it with a match. Dry season's coming. Shame if a fire started in your south pasture. Lucas drew his gun. That would be a mistake. 3 of us, one of you, Clancy laughed. And the lady doesn't count. The retort of Hazel's rifle split the air. The bullet kicked up dirt at Clancy's horse's feet, causing the animal to rear in panic. The lady counts just fine, Hazel said, working the lever to chamber another round. And there won't be any fires on my land tonight. For a tense moment, no one moved. Then Lucas spoke, his voice deadly quiet. You boys have 2 choices. Ride away now or I start shooting, and unlike Miss O'Sullivan, I won't be aiming at the ground. Something in his tone, the absolute certainty of a man who had faced down worse threats, made the Henderson men hesitate. Henderson's not gonna let this go, Clancy warned, but he was already turning his horse. Tell Henderson if he wants a war, he's found one, Lucas replied. And remind him I've got friends at the Territorial Marshal's office who'd be very interested in his business practices. After the riders disappeared into the darkness, Hazel lowered her rifle. You don't actually have friends at the Marshal's office, do you? Lucas holstered his gun. Not yet, but Henderson doesn't know that. They'll be back, probably with more men. Then we'd better be ready. His eyes met hers, serious now. This is your fight, Hazel. If you want to sell, take the money and start fresh somewhere else. I won't judge you for it. Hazel thought of her father, of the years he'd put into this land, of the future she'd imagined building here. This is my home. I'm not leaving. Lucas nodded, as if her answer confirmed something he already knew. Then we stand our ground. Over the next days, they prepared for trouble. Lucas rode to neighboring ranches, smaller operations like Hazel's that had also resisted Henderson's pressure to sell. Many agreed to stand with them if things turned ugly. Hazel sent Miguel into town with letters for both the territorial governor and the federal marshal, detailing Henderson's threats and strong-arm tactics. She had no illusions that help would come quickly, if at all, but creating a paper trail might give Henderson pause. They were repairing the corral gate when Hazel finally asked the question that had been on her mind for days. Why are you doing this, Lucas? You could have moved on, found somewhere without all this trouble. He was silent for so long she thought he might not answer. Then he set down his hammer and turned to her. When I was forced out of Wyoming, I lost more than my badge. I lost my purpose, my sense of who I was. His eyes held hers. These past weeks, working this land with you, I've started to find that again. And if Henderson drives us off, he won't. Lucas's voice was firm. But even if the worst happens, I wouldn't regret staying. Something in his gaze made Hazel's heart quicken. They stood close, the air between them charged with unspoken feelings. Lucas, the distant sound of galloping hooves interrupted whatever she'd been about to say. They both turned to see a rider approaching fast, dust billowing behind him. It was young Tommy Jensen from the neighboring farm. Miss O'Sullivan, Mr. Irwin, he called, reining his horse to a sliding stop. Henderson's men are at our place. Pa sent me to warn you they're burning out everyone who won't sell. Lucas was already moving toward the stable. How many? At least 15 men. They've got torches and dynamite. Hazel's blood ran cold. Your family? Ma and the little ones are hiding in the root cellar. Pa and my brothers are trying to save what they can. Lucas emerged leading their saddled horses. We need to move fast. Tommy, ride to the Mitchell place, then the Wilsons. Tell them what's happening and to meet us at Jensen's farm. As they galloped across the open country, Hazel could see smoke rising in the distance. Fear and anger twisted in her gut. Henderson had finally shown his true colors. They crested a rise and the Jensen farm came into view below. The barn was fully engulfed in flames, and men on horseback were circling the house, where Mr. Jensen and his 2 older sons had taken cover behind an overturned wagon. 8 men, Lucas counted. The others must have moved on to the next farm. Hazel checked her rifle. How do you want to play this? Lucas looked at her with surprise and something like admiration. No lecture about staying back where it's safe. Would you listen if I gave one? A smile tugged at his mouth. No, madam. Then let's not waste time. Those are my neighbors down there. They split up, approaching from different directions. Hazel circled wide, using a stand of cottonwoods for cover. When she was in position, she fired a shot into the air. The Henderson men turned in confusion, momentarily distracted from their assault on the Jensen house. That was when Lucas made his move, charging down the hill and firing rapidly. His accuracy was uncanny. 2 men fell from their saddles before the others could react. The remaining raiders scattered, returning fire wildly. Hazel picked her shots carefully, aiming to disable rather than kill. One man's horse went down, pitching its rider into the dirt. Another clutched his arm and wheeled his mount around in retreat. In the chaos, the Jensen men seized their opportunity, emerging from behind the wagon with shotguns. Caught in a crossfire, Henderson's men broke ranks and fled. By the time the dust settled, 3 raiders lay wounded on the ground. The rest had vanished back toward town. Mr. Jensen emerged from the house, his face blackened with smoke. "You came just in time. They said Henderson ordered every resistor burned out by sundown." Lucas dismounted. "How many farms targeted? All the small spreads that refused to sell." 8, maybe 10 places. Other neighbors began to arrive, the Mitchells, the Wilsons, the Crawfords. Soon nearly 20 armed ranchers had gathered in the Jensen yard. Lucas addressed them grimly. "Henderson's gone too far. This isn't just strong arming anymore, it's open warfare against honest farmers and ranchers." "What can we do?" someone asked. "He's got the sheriff in his pocket." "Maybe so," Lucas replied, "but there's something he doesn't know. I sent a telegram to an old friend last week, U.S. Marshal James Cooper. He's been building a case against cattle associations using these tactics across the territories." Hazel stared at him. "You didn't tell me that." Wasn't sure he'd respond, but I got word this morning he's already in Helena with a federal judge and warrants. Hope flickered across the gathered faces. "So what's the plan?" Mr. Jensen asked. Lucas looked at Hazel. "Your call, it's your home," he threatened first. Hazel took a deep breath. For so long she'd fought alone, convinced that was the only way. Now, looking at these neighbors, people who'd known her father, watched her grow up, she realized the strength in standing together. "Henderson thinks he can pick us off one by one," she said. "But what if we all make a stand at once?" By dusk, the O'Sullivan ranch had become a fortress. Every neighboring family who'd been threatened had gathered there, bringing livestock, valuables, and fighting arms. The women and children were secured in the main house, while the men established defensive positions around the property. Lucas and Hazel stood on the porch, watching the sun sink behind the mountains. The fading light turned her auburn hair to fire, and Lucas found himself wishing they had met under different circumstances. "You've built something remarkable here," he said quietly. "Not just the ranch, but this community. They trust you." Hazel shook her head. "They're protecting their own interests." "It's more than that. They respect you, Hazel, even the ones who thought a woman couldn't run a ranch on her own." She glanced at him. "Including you. I never doubted you could run this place. I just thought you shouldn't have to do it alone." Their eyes held for a long moment. Lucas found himself moving closer, drawn by something he couldn't resist. Hazel's breath caught as he gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "If we survive tonight," he said softly, "I'd like to talk about the future, our future maybe." Before she could answer, a shout came from one of the lookouts. "Riders coming, at least 20 men." The moment shattered. Lucas's hand dropped to his gun. "Here we go." Henderson's force arrived with torches blazing, expecting to find an isolated woman easily intimidated. Instead, they faced a united front of determined ranchers. The standoff might have turned bloody if not for the unexpected arrival of a second group of riders from the east, 6 men wearing deputy marshal badges, led by a tall man with steel-gray hair and a formidable presence. Marshal Cooper dismounted at the edge of the property, his voice carrying across the tense gathering. "Arthur Henderson, I have federal warrants for your arrest on charges of conspiracy, extortion, and attempted murder." What followed was not the bloodbath everyone had feared, but the systematic dismantling of Henderson's operation. With federal authority behind them, Marshal Cooper's deputies arrested Henderson and his key men. Documents were seized from his office in town, revealing a pattern of corruption that stretched back years. Dawn found Hazel and Lucas sitting on her porch steps, exhausted but triumphant. The neighbors had returned to their homes, and Marshal Cooper had taken Henderson to Helena to stand trial. "It's really over," Hazel said, wonder in her voice. Lucas nodded. "Henderson's operation was bigger than I expected. Cooper says the evidence they found will put him away for years. And clear your name in Wyoming, Cooper thinks so. The same cattle association was behind both operations." Hazel studied his face in the soft morning light. "So what happens now? Will you go back to being a lawman?" Lucas was quiet for a moment. "Cooper offered me a deputy position." Her heart sank. "In Wyoming, here in Montana." His eyes met hers. "I told him I'd think about it." "What's to think about? It's your chance to reclaim your life, your reputation." "That's just it, Hazel." He took her hand, his touch warm and sure. "My life is different now. I'm different. These past months working this land, fighting alongside you, I've found something I never had as a lawman." "What's that?" "A home." He moved closer. "If you'll have me." Hazel thought of all the times people had called her stubborn, meant as criticism for a woman who refused to bend to convention, but Lucas had seen that stubbornness for what it really was: strength. The strength to stand her ground, to fight for what was hers, to build something lasting in a harsh and beautiful land. "I'll have you," she whispered, "on one condition. Name it: partners. Equal partners in everything: the ranch, the decisions, the future." Lucas smiled, that slow smile that never failed to warm her heart. Wouldn't have it any other way. As the sun rose higher, painting the valley in golden light, Lucas pulled her close. Their kiss was a promise, a beginning, a declaration of love forged in adversity and tempered by shared purpose. They called her stubborn, these people of Willow Creek. But Lucas Irwin saw beyond the label to the fierce, capable woman who had captured his heart. And as they sealed their future with a kiss, he knew he'd finally found where he belonged, beside the stubborn, magnificent woman who was more than strong enough for him, and the land that would be their legacy.